The stars used to sing to us, back before the sky turned red and the Earth's oceans boiled, back before we were pets, refugees, jokes, before the alien councils put collars on our necks and called it peace. They didn't see us as equals, not even enemies, just survivors of a broken planet wandering through space like rats in burnt ships. We waited. For decades. That was our crime, really. Patience. After the bombardment, when the Xerelians cracked Earth's mantle just to neutralize our war-making potential, we didn't fight back. Not when they melted our cities with solar flares. Not even when they herded our children into labor colonies on moons we didn't even have names for. The galaxy thought we were done, our bones scattered, our defiance extinguished. We waited longer. They called us the Lost Ones, the ash-tongued scars of Earth. Pity turned to mockery. We were everywhere. Dishwashers, miners, janitors. One species among thousands, clinging to what little dignity we had. And while they looked down on us, while they played politics and signed false treaties, we remembered. I was born on Reinar III, a dust ball of a mining colony buried in the shadow of two purple suns. My mother died giving birth to me in a scrapyard medical tent. I never saw a tree until I was 23, never tasted rain until my mid-30s. My father, well, he wasn't my real father, but he taught me the words of the old Earth, taught me about Hiroshima, Stalingrad, Vietnam, Mars Rebellion. We don't win because we're stronger, he used to say. We win because we refuse to stay broken. That became my doctrine. I joined the work camps young, smuggled parts even younger. I learned to slice Xerelian interfaces, hack Uxari defense drones, and speak the guttural code language of the Kraven slavers. I smiled when they laughed at me, bowed when they barked commands. I became what they expected, obedient, disposable, forgotten, but deep beneath Reinar III, in the abandoned titanium veins, we were building something. We called it Project Echo. Not a ship, not a weapon, a message, a signal to every scattered human across the stars. To the orphans scraping food in Plurnian gutters. To the engineers forced to build tech for their masters. To the assassins, thieves, hackers, prostitutes, those surviving by licking the boots of their conquerors. It's time. The signal was simple. Raw, ancient Earth code wrapped in encrypted layers older than the Council itself. It spread faster than we imagined, faster than the Xerelians could suppress. And then, things began to change. The galaxy didn't notice it at first. A freighter disappears over Dranaxis. A Xerelian governor's shuttle explodes on re-entry. A weapons depot on Varlock gets hijacked by unknowns. They blamed pirates, black market syndicates, rebellious colonies. But it was us, all of us, the humans they forgot, waking up. They didn't understand what they'd let simmer beneath their boots for 83 years. They saw us smile, beg, scrape, but they never saw the clenched fists behind our backs. And then came the Kevelin massacre, a Xerelian noble, drunk, bored, tossed a child into a reactor vent for sport. The child's father was human, former combat engineer. He didn't scream, he didn't cry, he smiled. 5 minutes later, the entire orbital city of Kevelin was in flames. That was the moment we stopped hiding. That was the moment the galaxy began to whisper the word human again, but this time with fear. And me? I was just getting started. My name is Cale Maddox. Earthborn by blood, ghost by training, rebel by necessity. And this is the story of how we reminded the universe what patience really buys you. It buys you time, it buys you rage, it buys you war. And now? Now no species will ever forget the moment we finally snapped. The day Kevelin burned, everything changed. Not just for the Xerelians, not just for the Council, but for every species in the galaxy that ever thought of humans as background noise. They tried to silence it, of course. A freak incident. Human mental instability. They called it an isolated case, blamed it on trauma. But then 10 more colonies followed, 10 more uprisings, silent, coordinated, vicious. You don't understand what patience teaches you until you live in chains. When you're ignored long enough, when you're beaten into silence for generations, you don't just learn how to survive. You learn how to study your enemy, their weaknesses, their overconfidence, their blindness. We were everywhere. That was our strength. In their factories, their navies, their data banks, even in their homes, and they never noticed us sharpening our knives. I left Rhinar 3 2 days after Kevelin. Our mining compound went dark. The Zarelian overseers? Gone. Their bodies rotted in the tunnels while our people stripped the station for parts. We didn't mourn them. We melted their weapons and hacked their ships. We'd prepared for this day for decades. I took a stolen jump cruiser, barely spaceworthy, and headed for Veltrax 9, a frozen communications moon used by the Council. That was our next target. We had 3 missions: shut down the relay hub, broadcast the rebellion's existence, and extract a sleeper agent known only as Whisper. I didn't know who Whisper was. I didn't need to. All I knew was that they'd been feeding us information for over a decade. Council troop movements, security gaps, shipping codes, and it was time to pull them out before they got exposed. The trip through warp was rough. The cruiser stank of blood and oil. I slept maybe once in 3 days. Dreams were filled with screams. Sometimes mine, sometimes my father's, sometimes strangers I never met. You carry the ghosts of Earth with you. They follow you into the stars. I arrived in Veltrax orbit under fake Zyrelian credentials. We'd learned their bureaucracy better than they had. Their arrogance made their systems sloppy. The orbital control didn't even blink. A bored-sounding Plentari officer waved me through. I landed on Dock 17 under the alias Cargo Technician 4B Delta. The cold hit me like a hammer. The entire moon was carved from ancient ice and steel. They said it never thawed, even in the core. Fitting, I thought. Cold, heartless, silent, just like the Council. I met up with my crew underground. There were 4 of them. All human, all ghosts like me. Arlen, an ex-pilot who flew escort missions during the evacuation wars, lost both his legs when a Zarelian patrol ship bombed a refugee convoy. Now he moved on mechanical limbs he built himself. Nira, a medic from Mars Base 7. She'd watched her whole hospital collapse when Council ships accidentally fired on civilian structures. She didn't smile much. Hex, a kid, barely 20, hacker, quiet, brilliant. The Council tried to rewire him for labor work in their AI centers. Didn't take. Now he rewired them instead. And Loma, I didn't know where she came from, but she had those haunted eyes. The kind that had seen too much and said too little. They didn't greet me with cheers. That wasn't our way. Just a nod. A quiet nod that said, "We're here. We're ready. Let's end this." The relay station sat in the northern quadrant, guarded by a mix of Zarelians and Varkari drones. Getting in was the easy part. Nira sliced the access doors like she was born with Zarelian fingers. Hex flooded the system with fake repair orders, so all the cameras looped old footage. Arlen kept watch while Loma and I pushed deep into the comms core. We planted the virus in silence. It wasn't just code. It was a digital scream. A beacon that would activate dormant human relays across the galaxy. Old Earth tech, buried in outposts and scrapyards, waiting for a signal. This wasn't about battle plans or commands. It was about reminding us we still exist. The moment the virus activated, it spread like wildfire. Across forgotten satellites, through garbage data streams, through the whispers of ancient Earth AI that had been sleeping for almost a century. In seconds, the human race reconnected, like nerves regrowing around a damaged spine. I remember standing there, watching the uplink beam into the stars, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. But then the alarm hit. We didn't expect it. Whisper had warned us of a 2-hour blind window. We had 57 minutes. The council moved faster than we thought. Gunfire erupted down the tunnel. Arlen's voice cracked through the comms. "We've got Varkari inbound, full squad." We scattered. Nira and Hex bolted toward the west shaft. Loma and I headed south, toward the prisoners' block. Whisper was there, still in disguise, still waiting for us. We took corners fast, silent, slipping through shadows. Loma moved like a wraith. I had no idea what she'd been before, but her kill count was climbing fast. She dropped a guard with one stab to the throat, didn't even break stride. We reached the holding cell. Whisper was not what I expected. He was old, fragile, wrinkled like a dried leaf. His eyes were blind, but they locked onto mine with precision. "You're Cale Maddox," he said. His voice was steady. "I've heard your name for 30 years. I froze. "You know me?" He smiled. "I've been feeding you for half my life." I didn't have time for questions. I grabbed him, threw his arm over my shoulder, and we ran. But we were too late. The southern bay had collapsed under fire. Arlen was already dead, his torso torn open, metal legs twisted. Nira was gone. Hex was shot in the back as he tried to reroute power to the escape doors. I saw him fall through the security feed. Only Loma, Whisper, and I made it to the auxiliary dock. We found a small Xyrelian skiff, unarmed, barely functional, but it flew. As we lifted off, I looked back at Veltrax 9. The moon was already crawling with reinforcements. Dozens of ships, hundreds of drones, all too late. The virus had already launched. The rebellion was no longer rumor. It was real. And across the galaxy, 1 million humans lifted their heads for the first time in a generation. Some killed, some ran, some simply whispered, "It's time." The council issued a statement the next day. "Isolated human extremists, a minor terror event, no threat to galactic order." But their eyes said something else. I saw the way the Xyrelians twitched in news feeds. I saw the way council guards started carrying their weapons closer, tighter. The way entire stations began issuing new background checks for human staff. They knew. They had no idea where we'd strike next. That was the power of patience. The moment it snapped, we were everywhere. And nowhere. Whisper was dying. The flight out of Veltrax had strained his body too far. He'd been kept alive for years by Council Nanotech. They cut the supply when they found out who he really was. In the medbay of a stolen skiff, drifting in deep space, he held my hand. "You must finish what we began." His voice cracked. "You must make them remember Earth." "I will," I said. He nodded once and died with a smile on his face. His name was Thomas Ardeen, once a senator of Earth's last parliament, thought dead in the Xyrelian purges. Instead, he'd been feeding the resistance for over 30 years from inside their own halls. A ghost like the rest of us. But now his ghost was louder than ever. I transmitted a message that night, encrypted, bouncing off ancient satellites through broken relays. It reached every human still breathing in the galaxy. You were not forgotten. You were not broken. Earth lives in you. Rise. And they did. I heard stories. A human bartender on Morax II poisoned an entire Xyrelian diplomatic crew. A group of engineers on a shipping rig over Ranthus 4 rerouted the entire orbital platform into a council weapons factory. A teenage girl on Velus Prime walked into the council hall and detonated herself with 10 kilos of stolen star core. Took out the entire chamber. We were patient for too long. Now we were done waiting. And no species, no empire, no fleet, no God will ever forget what we became once that patience ran out. Space is a graveyard. You don't really feel that until you're drifting through it in a ship that stinks of smoke and blood, with only dead friends and unanswered questions to keep you company. After we escaped Veltrax 9, I spent 3 days in silence. Whisper's body was wrapped in a heating blanket in the back room. Loma hadn't spoken a word since we left. Her eyes stared out the viewport like she was looking for something that had already died. I tried to sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Arlen's legs twitching in a pool of red. Saw Hex's thin fingers scrambling across a keyboard before he crumpled like a rag doll. Saw Nira's mouth opening, but no sound came out before the blast ripped her away. They died for a signal, a whisper in the dark. But that whisper had turned into a scream. On the 4th day, the message came through. Encrypted. Old Earth binary. Only humans could read it, only those who still remembered the ancient frequencies, the ones used before the Council outlawed our tech, our language, our history. It was short. 12 words. Rally point, derelict station EOS 7. 1 week, Maddox leads. I didn't send that message, which meant someone else was pulling strings, someone powerful, someone watching. Loma looked at me when I told her. "You're not the leader," she said flatly. "No," I said, "but I guess I'm the symbol now." She didn't argue, just nodded once and started prepping the skiff for warp. EOS 7 wasn't a station, not anymore. It used to be a science hub back in the early Council days, orbited a dead planet on the edge of the Talari dust belt. When the Council started cutting funding to human-led programs, they shut it down. Left it to rot. Which, of course, meant we claimed it. We arrived 3 days early. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few dozen survivors, some scavenged ships, a broken comms rig if we were lucky. But the minute we breached the outer ring, I realized something had changed. EOS 7 was alive. Dozens of ships docked on the old spires. Human ships. Scrap-built, ugly things, patched with every kind of tech imaginable. Zerelian hulls with earth cores, Kraven cannons welded onto Martian shells. Each one was different, but they all flew under one banner now. Us. As we docked, I saw faces through the viewports, scarred, hardened, but not hopeless. They stood when I walked through the airlock. Not for applause, not for cheers, just respect. A soldier with burn scars across his face saluted. A group of children stared at me like I was some kind of ghost story come to life. A mechanic whispered my name like a prayer. I wasn't ready for it, but I nodded back, and they kept working. Loma peeled off without a word. She didn't like attention. I didn't blame her. I was led to the central hall, old command center, probably used for research coordination once. Now it was the beating heart of the rebellion. Screens flickered with intercepted transmissions. Data maps glowed with troop movements, shipping lines, target profiles. It wasn't just a hideout. It was an army being born. At the center stood a woman. Tall, worn coat, gray streak in her hair. She had the look of someone who hadn't smiled in 20 years. But damn if her eyes didn't burn with fire. "You're late," she said. "Didn't know I was invited," I replied. She smirked. "You weren't. But we needed a face. After Veltrax, the name Kale Maddox lit a fuse across the galaxy. You turned a broken signal into a call for war." I stepped forward. "Who are you?" She folded her arms. "Commander Alira Vecht, Earthborn, fought during the Exodus riots. I watched the Council glass New Berlin from orbit and swore I'd live long enough to piss on their graves." "You organized this?" "Started it. But it was never about me. It was about unity. And right now, Maddox, you are unity." I didn't want to be. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man dragging too many ghosts behind him, but something in her eyes told me I didn't have a choice anymore. "What's the plan?" I asked. Alira turned to the holotable. Lights flickered as a new map loaded, one of the Council's largest military supply routes, the Meridian Vein. It stretched across 6 systems, protected by drone fleets and Zarelian frigates. "We hit this," she said. "Hard." I blinked. "That's suicide. They'll see us coming light years away." She smiled. "They'll see humans. They won't expect coordination." And that was the truth, wasn't it? The Council had always seen us as chaos, disorganized, individual, angry but scattered. They didn't know we'd been building this in silence, in shadows. Alira tapped a sector on the map. "Their biggest flaw is pride. This convoy moves weapons and food to their war fleets. They think it's untouchable. But we've been slipping agents into their transport crews for years. We have overrides, flight codes, schedules. This is our chance." I looked around the room. I saw pilots, hackers, demolition experts, smugglers, all with that same look in their eyes. Not revenge, purpose. "How many will die?" I asked. "Enough," Alira said, "but more will die if we wait." I nodded once. "Then let's make history." The next 5 days were war prep. Fast, dirty, beautiful. Old weapons were dragged out of cryo vaults, Earth-built railguns, EMP slingers, acid bombs. Loma trained new fighters with dead-eyed focus. I watched a girl who couldn't have been more than 15 disassemble a Zarelian plasma cannon in under 60 seconds. Hope was a funny thing. It didn't grow loud, it grew quiet, steady, certain. On the 6th day, our fleet launched, 39 ships, some barely held together with duct tape and spit, others powered by stolen alien cores. But they flew, together. We dropped out of warp just outside the Meridian Vein. Alira's voice came through the comms. "No speeches, no oaths, just fire." And we fired. The convoy never saw us coming. Their ships were sleek, perfect, lined in gold and blue, designed for beauty and intimidation. Ours were rust and grit, but they tore through the first layer of defense like paper. We didn't fight fair. We fought like survivors. Hex's old code resurfaced in the chaos, his last gift. It hijacked their comms, locked their shields, blinded their targeting systems. I led the charge in a retrofitted interceptor called Dustwalker. My hands trembled as I gripped the controls. Then I thought of Whisper, of Arlen, of Earth, and I pushed forward. The Council ships tried to regroup, but they were slow, too confident, too polished, and we were rage-given form. Explosions ripped through the void. Alira's ship, the Broken Flame, plowed straight through their central freighter, split it in half. We didn't take prisoners. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 32 Council ships were burning in the dark. The Meridian Vein was shattered. We lost 14 ships, 300 fighters. But when the smoke cleared, the galaxy saw something it hadn't seen in almost 100 years: humanity fighting back and winning. The Council tried to spin it. A terrorist ambush. Outlaws with stolen tech. They released propaganda, showed images of their dead commanders, claimed it was an attack on peace. But the people weren't buying it anymore. Other species, ones that had been quietly watching, began to question. Small riots broke out on Kraven-controlled worlds. Laborers walked off jobs in protest. Zarelian governors reported security breakdowns. And in the dark, through ancient channels, a new signal spread. The Earthborn are rising. I sat in Dustwalker's cockpit for hours after the battle, blood on my face, my body aching, my heart heavier than ever. But for the first time, I knew what I was fighting for. Not revenge, not even justice. Remembrance. We were the ghosts of a world they tried to erase. But now, we were loud enough to shake the stars, and we were only just beginning. Victory's a strange thing. It doesn't feel like fireworks or fanfare when you're in it. It's quieter, heavier, like breathing through ash. After the Meridian vein burned, word spread faster than we expected. Not just across human resistance cells, but across the species lines the Council thought they'd sealed shut long ago. We were supposed to be scattered, disorganized, angry but directionless. That's how they saw us. That's how they needed to see us. But after that battle, even they couldn't pretend anymore, and they panicked. The Council closed all high-security trade lanes, enforced biometric checkpoints on every border world, put surveillance back into full tilt, especially on any station or system with more than 10,000 humans living there. But it was too late. The lie had cracked, and light was leaking through. What they didn't understand was that we didn't need a full army to win this war. We needed unity, purpose. Even if we were still just a handful of rebels with scavenged weapons, we had something they lost centuries ago. Belief. The belief that we deserved to exist. We moved base operations from EOS 7 to Carthus, an abandoned moon orbiting a collapsed gas giant. Used to be a smuggling port before the Council vaporized its population as a warning 2 decades back. Now it was ours. The ships that survived Meridian limped back there one by one. Damaged, bloodied, but proud. Our people welcomed them like returning titans. Even the injured walked with their heads high. I stood near the landing pad when the last 2 ships touched down. Loma was beside me, arms folded, quiet as usual. She hadn't said much since the battle, but she hadn't left my side either. I guess that was her version of loyalty. "You still don't think you're a leader?" she said suddenly. I looked at her, surprised she spoke. "I'm not," I said. "I'm just trying not to get everyone killed." "You think leaders don't feel like that?" she asked. I didn't answer, just watched the crews disembark. Some cheered, others wept. Some carried pieces of fallen comrades in their arms, broken helmets, bloody coats, data chips containing final logs. I saw a girl no older than 16, clutching her dead brother's boots to her chest, like they were sacred. She didn't cry, just sat there in the dust, rocking back and forth, holding on to what was left. That's what victory looked like. We held a war council that night, in an old steel hall filled with rusted terminals and flickering lights. The leaders of the resistance gathered, what was left of them. Alira Vecht stood at the front, with her usual fire, but even she looked worn now. Her hair was tied back, her coat burned in one sleeve, eyes sunken with exhaustion. I stood beside her. I didn't want to, but she insisted. "We shook the galaxy," she began. "Now we see who shakes back." Around the table sat over 20 humans from all corners of what was left. Mars separatists, Earth preservationists, Black Flag outlaws, even a few former Council-trained officers who'd defected in the early years. Most had scars. Many had replacements, metal arms, prosthetic eyes, lungs kept alive with stolen alien biotech. One of them, an old colonel named Ride, leaned forward. "The problem with noise," he said, "is that it attracts predators. The Zeralians will send full war fleets next time. Not drones, not guards, ships that burned Earth itself. We won't survive another head-on." Alira nodded. "We're not looking for another fight yet. We need to cripple them economically, cut off their energy cores, starve their fleets." A woman named Yai, a cyberneticist from the Titan outposts, tapped her data tablet. "There's a facility, Zenthra 14, Council-owned, deep core reactor. It supplies almost 20% of their military's fuel across 3 sectors. "Security?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Maximum, triple-walled defense rings, automated sentries, orbital scanners. It's a fortress. Then why mention it? Because it's run by a former human collaborator, she said. Name's Dr. Emil Karras, a traitor. Helped the Council design the first slave bond tech they used on us after the bombardment. He's the reason half our people still wear tracking chips in their spines. My fists clenched. I'd heard the name before. My father used to spit it like venom. Karras, I whispered. That bastard's still alive? Alive and thriving, Alira growled. He's the one we need. Kill him. Steal the core. Burn the station. I looked around the table. Every pair of eyes stared back, waiting for me to say yes. That's when I realized it. I was the voice now. The movement had grown past planning, past whispers. People needed someone to follow. Not because I was the smartest or strongest, but because I'd lit the match at Veltrax and hadn't let go since. I gave a slow nod. Karras dies. We burn the core. No survivors. The team we put together was small. Just 5 of us. Myself. Loma, of course. Yay for her expertise in hacking council systems. A demolitions expert named Krantz. A towering man with a melted face and a temper to match. And a silent sniper known only as Shade, who never took off his helmet and never missed a shot. We called it Operation Black Signal. The infiltration plan was a mess of timing, luck, and a lot of suicidal confidence. We entered Zenthra 14, disguised as council security inspectors, using forged IDs pulled from a Zarelian officer we captured and interrogated 2 weeks prior. His screams still echoed in the medical bay sometimes. The guards let us in. That was their first mistake. The station was a marvel of cold, efficient horror, gleaming black walls, perfect climate control. You could almost forget it powered war machines that had wiped out entire continents. Almost. We found Karras on the upper levels. He looked human. Old. Glasses. Hair neatly combed. No scars, no shame. He smiled when he saw me. I was wondering how long it'd take you to find me, he said. I pulled my gun. He didn't flinch. You built the chains they used on us, I growled. You made humans into property. I made survivors, he said calmly. You think your rebellion's noble. But all I ever wanted was for our species to live, even if it meant compromise, submission. You think dying in fire is better than adapting? Living as slaves isn't survival, I said. He shrugged. Then die free. That's your choice. It wasn't mine. I almost shot him right there, but Yai stopped me. We need him to unlock the core room, she whispered. Karras chuckled. Still need the monster, I see. We made him do it. Hands shaking, he accessed the primary systems and deactivated the interior defenses. That's when Krantz and Shade moved in, planting charges throughout the energy core's cooling chambers. We had 10 minutes. I turned to Karras, gun still drawn. You're going to die now, I said. He nodded, but then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said something that still haunts me. I hope you win, because if you don't, the next Karras they create will be even worse. I pulled the trigger. His blood sprayed the console, his body crumpled like paper, and I felt nothing. The explosion lit the sky for an hour. We escaped in a stolen patrol craft, barely avoiding orbital retaliation. By the time Council fleets responded, Zenthra 14 was gone. Fuel starved, their fleets staggered, and humanity had sent a message. We will even kill our own if they betray us. But victory never comes clean. Back at Karthus, the celebration was short. Yai pulled me aside that night. Her face was pale. I cracked Karras's files, she said. There's something you need to see. She handed me a tablet. On it were images, council documents, heavily encrypted, transcripts, surveillance logs. My blood ran cold. One image showed a council chamber, a tall figure standing at the center. Female, gray-streaked hair, Alira Vecht, working with the council, receiving orders. My head spun. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." Yai nodded. "It's a deep game. She's been feeding them partial intel. Keeping us just successful enough to grow, but not enough to win. Controlled rebellion, a tool." I couldn't breathe. It made sense. The convenient leads, the narrow escapes, the quiet deaths of rival leaders who didn't agree with her. Alira was a council asset. And now I had to decide what to do, because the revolution needed her. But if we let her stay, we'd already lost. I didn't sleep after reading that file. Didn't blink much either. Just sat there in the command chamber, back hunched over, that damn tablet screen still glowing in my hands like it was radioactive. I read it over and over again, hoping it'd change, hoping I'd misunderstood. But it was all there. Clear. Brutal. Undeniable. Alira Vecht. Commander. War hero. Revolutionary. Traitor. She'd been in contact with the council for over 15 years. Fed them limited intel about resistance movements, names of potential threats within the rebellion, enough to help shape us without letting us collapse. They called her Asset Thorn. I wanted to vomit. Yai stood nearby, her face pale under the flickering lights. "I ran a triple check," she said quietly. "It's her. Encrypted voice matches, blood ID, facial scans. It's not fake." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My mind kept flashing back to her face. The woman who led the charge into Meridian, who looked me in the eyes after we burned the vein and said, "You made them believe again." Was any of it real? Or was I just another puppet with a fire lit under my feet? Loma appeared in the doorway. She didn't ask what was wrong. Didn't need to. She could read it on my face like a headline. "She lied," I said finally. My voice cracked. "Alira. She's been playing both sides." Loma nodded once, like she'd been expecting it all along. "What now?" she asked. I didn't have an answer, because if I told the rebellion the truth, everything we'd built might collapse overnight. People had followed her, believed in her. Some had died for her orders. But if I stayed quiet, I'd be no better than she was. I'd be complicit in the lie. That morning we held a council meeting in the upper hangar. Alira stood at the center, back straight, coat clean, voice firm as ever. "The council's in retreat," she announced. "Zenthra's destruction has sent shockwaves across their war network. Their ships are grounded in at least 4 sectors." The room broke into murmurs. Cheers, smiles. Even after all the blood, people still craved good news. It gave them purpose. Then she looked at me. "Kale," she said. "Tell them what you saw." I opened my mouth. The words were there. The truth. But nothing came out. I looked into those eyes. Cold, focused, dangerous, and I understood. She knew I knew. This wasn't a victory speech. It was a warning. She'd planned for this. I forced a smile. "She's right," I said quietly. "The council's running scared. Now's the time to press forward." Cheers erupted, and inside I felt myself die a little. Later, in the shadows of the old comms room, I finally confronted her. Just us, just silence, just 2 leaders of a rebellion built on a cracked foundation. "You could have told me," I said, barely above a whisper. Alira didn't look surprised. I was wondering how long it would take Yai to find the files. I stepped closer. "You used us, used me." "I guided us," she said calmly. "And I gave you a war we could win." "You gave the council our names, our people." "I gave them the ones who would have turned this into chaos," she said, unflinching. "Terrorists, extremists, the ones who would have made us monsters. I kept this movement clean, Kale. Clean enough to last? I shook my head. You don't get to decide who lives and who doesn't. Yes, I do, she snapped. Because someone has to. We stared at each other, eyes locked. And in that moment, I saw her truth. She wasn't evil. She wasn't loyal to the council. Not really. She was loyal to control, to order. She thought humans needed a leash, even from themselves. You think you're saving us, I said bitterly. I'm ensuring we survive, she said. And you're not ready to lead them without me. I turned and walked out. I didn't kill her. Not yet. But something inside me snapped that night. 2 days later, the Council struck back, a coordinated orbital assault on Delvar 6, one of the few liberated colonies we'd helped rebuild. They didn't send warnings, no demands, no negotiations. They sent fire. Over 20,000 humans died. Farmers, children, engineers, no soldiers, no resistance hubs, just civilians trying to build something from the ashes. When the news reached Carthus, the entire station fell into silence. The screams echoed over broken transmissions. One clip showed a mother clutching her baby as fire tore through the sky. Another showed a man covered in ash, screaming into a dead comms beacon. And all I could hear were Whisper's words in my head. You must make them remember Earth. So I called a meeting. Not in the hangar. Not in the command hall. On the old landing deck, under the stars. Open air. No walls, no structure, just truth. Over 200 resistance members came. Pilots, gunners, doctors, engineers, orphans. I stood on a crate. No weapons, no speech written, just pain and truth. I need to tell you something, I began. The silence was suffocating. For the past 15 years, someone in our highest command has been feeding the Council our movements, our weaknesses, not enough to kill us, just enough to control us, shape us. Gasps, shouts, confusion. I kept going. That someone is Alira Vecht. Cries of no rang out. Some cursed, some wept, some stared at me like I'd just killed their god. She didn't do it for the Council, I said. She did it because she didn't trust us. She thought we were dangerous, unruly. She thought the only way humans could survive was on a leash. A man stepped forward. Ride, the old colonel. That's a bold accusation, he growled. I nodded. I have the files, her voice, her blood ID. She didn't deny it when I confronted her. People turned to each other. Some cried, some just shook their heads. She gave us victories, someone shouted. And she gave the Council our blood, I snapped. She chose who got to live, who got sacrificed. We're not here to survive like rats. We're here to remember who we are. And if we become what they are just to win, then Earth really did die with fire. Loma stepped up beside me. For the first time in all our time together, she spoke louder than a whisper. I watched Alira order the death of 2 units because she thought they'd rebel, not against the Council. Against her. Silence fell again. Then slowly, one by one, they stood. Not all, but enough. Enough to show that humanity had finally chosen truth over fear. Alira fled that night. Her quarters were empty by morning. No guards, no fight. Just a message on my private channel. You win, Maddox. Don't waste what I built. She left the galaxy after that. Disappeared into the edges of known space. Maybe she started over somewhere. Maybe she died. I never saw her again. And I didn't want to. We held a vote. They asked me to lead. I didn't say yes, not at first. Because leadership isn't glory. It's grief management. It's knowing people will die because of you. It's standing over graves and writing letters to children who won't understand why mom or dad never came back. But in the end, I said yes. Not because I wanted power, but because someone had to remind us that our rage was righteous. But it couldn't make us monsters. The rebellion changed after that. We became sharper, louder, bolder, no more half measures, no more restraint. But we also remembered who we were. We didn't bomb civilian council worlds. We didn't kill surrendered enemies. We treated prisoners with dignity, even when our own hadn't been, because we weren't just fighting to win. We were fighting to be human again. And across the stars, the other species started noticing. Some joined us, quietly, secretly. Even the oppressed alien races under council rule began sending whispers our way. Because the council didn't just fear our weapons, they feared our example. They feared what we would become if we ever truly stood up. And now we were standing, not just as soldiers, as a people. We didn't flinch anymore. Every day after Alira disappeared, the rebellion hardened. Not out of vengeance, not even out of pride. It was something deeper, something old. Focus. When you finally see your enemy clearly, when the mask breaks and all the lies burn away, something settles inside your chest. Heavier than hate, heavier than grief. Clarity, and that clarity pushed us forward. We had no more illusions, no heroes left, just people doing what needed to be done. We called it Operation Dawnfall, a direct assault on Zareth Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council. It sounded insane, suicidal even. But we weren't planning to take the planet. We weren't even trying to kill their High Chancellors. We wanted their truth. Zareth wasn't just a capital, it was an archive. A world-sized database storing every major political decision. Every war order, every atrocity papered over with false treaties and polished PR, including, we hoped, the classified records about the fall of Earth. Because if we were going to burn the council down, we wanted to do it with their own sins. Our crew was small, not because we lacked numbers, we were growing faster than we could track, but because stealth was key. This wasn't a fight, it was a heist. Myself, Loma, Yai, our tech mastermind. Shade, the silent sniper, still faceless, still precise. And a new recruit, Carlo, of Arkari Defector, one of the first aliens to officially join the Resistance. Kalo was tall, scaled, eyes like polished obsidian. His people were once proud warriors, but the Council had neutered them, banned their traditions, erased their history, forced them into docile service. Kalo had watched his own father executed for refusing to burn their ancestral scrolls. He didn't smile, didn't speak much either, but I trusted him more than most humans. Our plan was surgical. Disguise as interspecies diplomatic envoys, breach Zareth's lower docks during an upcoming political summit, slip into the archive chambers beneath the Hall of Balance, extract the files, broadcast them across every open and black market frequency in the galaxy, expose the Council, not with war, but with truth. Zareth Prime didn't look like the capital of an empire built on genocide. It was beautiful. Floating spires made of translucent crystal, gravity-defying bridges, parks in the clouds, clean air, music in the streets, every species living in harmony. A lie, of course, but a pretty one. We landed under the alias envoys of the unified Kalethri tribes, a dead political faction from a border war the Council had buried decades ago. No one questioned it. They smiled. They bowed. They logged us and scanned us but didn't even look twice, because they didn't expect humans to walk into the lion's den, especially not like this. Inside, it felt like walking through the opposite of war. Polished halls, peaceful murals, quiet laughter. I hated it, because I knew what it had cost to build. Beneath every marble floor was a grave. Beneath every diplomatic promise was a pile of burned flags. We moved through the outer wings smoothly. Yai spoofed the surveillance, fed back clean loops. Kalo provided the access credentials. We still didn't know how he had them, but every door opened with his codes. Eventually, we reached the archive core. a massive subterranean vault beneath the Hall of Balance, the Council's historical preservation site. That was the term they used. Sounded neutral, clean. It was guarded by 2 Zarelians in ceremonial armor. Loma took the first with a silent blade to the throat. Shade shot the second through the eye before the body hit the floor. We entered without an alarm being triggered. The main data vault was 3 levels below. Yai dropped into a trance as she worked the console. Her fingers moved like they weren't even hers. Fast, flawless, dancing over alien code like it was second nature. Sweat poured down her face as the system fought back, layer after encrypted layer. "Give me 10, she grunted. We watched the corridor. Footsteps echoed. We heard voices. We froze. But they passed. 8 minutes in, Yai gasped. "I'm in." She pulled up a central directory and projected it. I stared at the hologram. File after file. Folders labeled in cold, bureaucratic language. Earth Incident. Class Omega Termination Protocol. Humanity Psychological Containment Strategies. Project Chain Asset. Thorn Compliance Files. And one folder, locked behind 4 layers of encryption, simply titled, Exodus True Cause. "Open that," I said. Ye hesitated. "It's buried deep, heavily booby-trapped. If I try, we might trigger a trace." "Do it," I said. She nodded and got to work. It took 3 minutes. When it opened, the room went silent. Lines of raw data spilled across the screen. Voice logs, holographic recordings, internal reports. And then, one file played automatically. A council summit. The image flickered, stabilized. 12 alien leaders sitting in a circle. Nervous, silent. Then one Zarelian spoke. "Earth's advancement rate has exceeded projection. AI containment protocols failed. Genetic enhancements spreading without regulation. Weaponized fusion cores developed outside of oversight." Another added, "They solved dark matter compression in 80 years. No species has ever evolved this quickly. It's exponential, unnatural." A Plantari commander chimed in. "If left unchecked, they'll destabilize the galactic balance in 2 generations. We can't stop them later. We stop them now." And then came the decision. Unanimous. Glass the planet. Frame it as an internal collapse. Erase their history. Scatter survivors. Rewrite the records. Let them degrade into irrelevance. That was it. Earth didn't fall because we made a mistake. Earth was murdered because we were growing too fast. We were too adaptive, too dangerous. We were the threat. And they killed our world not out of hate, but out of fear. I felt sick. Loma stared at the floor, fists clenched. Shade said nothing, just turned his face away. Kalo's eyes were locked on the screen, unmoving. "They destroyed Earth," I whispered, "because they couldn't control what we'd become." Yai's voice trembled. "We were never broken. They just broke us before we could rise. We downloaded everything, every file, every second. Yai routed it to a secure sub-channel buried deep in Council communication systems. In 20 minutes, every corner of the galaxy would know the truth. Then the alarms hit. We'd been traced. Doors slammed shut. Red lights flared. Distant shouting. Footsteps closing in. We were surrounded. "No way out the way we came," Yai said. "We need an alternate route." Shade stepped forward, checked his rifle. "I'll stay behind, cover the hallway." "No," I snapped. He nodded once, almost sadly. "Someone has to." He turned and disappeared into the corridor before I could argue. We ran. Kalo guided us through maintenance tunnels only a Varkari could navigate, crawling through ancient waste vents, crumbling stairwells. Council guards flooded the lower levels, but we stayed one step ahead. Ye took a graze to the shoulder during a brief firefight. Loma carried her. We reached the subdocks just as Council dropships began landing. I looked back once. Smoke filled the archive chamber, fires rising, bodies in the halls, and somewhere above us, across the sky, the truth was already spreading. When we made it back to Carthus, the galaxy had changed. News feeds were flooded. Not council lies, our truth. The footage of the council summit played on every pirate channel, every resistance terminal, every smuggler's data pad. Even council-controlled worlds couldn't stop it. It leaked through encrypted lines, underground nets, neural links. They tried to deny it, called it fake, enemy propaganda. But it was too late. People remembered Earth. They remembered what they'd been told, and now they knew it had been a lie. Other species began to riot. Council stations burned. Former allies turned. The fragile order they'd built started to crack. And humanity? We finally saw ourselves not as survivors, but as the spark that would burn the Empire down. Later that night, Loma and I sat alone on the observation deck. She hadn't said a word since the mission. I broke the silence. They were afraid of us. She nodded. They should be. I looked out at the stars, thought about Earth, about the soil I never touched, the trees I never saw, the rain I never felt. They tried to erase us, I said, but all they did was give us a reason to rise. She looked at me with those tired, burning eyes. We were patient, she whispered. Now we're awake. I used to dream about this moment. The day the galaxy finally saw what they'd done to us. When the lies crumbled and truth spilled out like blood in the stars. When we weren't pitied, mocked, or ignored, but remembered, feared, respected. And now that it was here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a storm we couldn't stop. Within a week of the Zareth broadcast, over 70 Outer Rim worlds were in full rebellion. Entire alien colonies turned against the Council, not for humanity, for themselves. Our truth had broken the spell, shattered the illusion that the Council was fair, stable, just. Turns out, we weren't the only species they'd kept on a leash. The Varkari burned 5 Council outposts in one day. The Plentari unions declared secession from the Central Trade Fleets. Even some Xyrelians, especially the younger ones, began leaking confidential data to resistance networks. Chaos spread faster than we could track. The Council retaliated brutally. They glassed 4 colonies, executed whole families, dropped virus bombs on supply hubs they couldn't retake. But it wasn't enough. For the first time in over a century, the Empire was bleeding. Back on Carthus, the rebellion had tripled in size. New ships docked daily. Refugees, warriors, exiles, even former Council defectors. The hangars were filled with different languages, different uniforms, but the same rage. And that scared me. Not the growth. The rage. Because it wasn't always focused. It didn't care about morals. It didn't care about lines we promised never to cross. People wanted revenge now. Raw, blind, unfiltered. It started small. A Xyrelian prisoner found dead in his cell, throat cut. A Plentari merchant beaten unconscious by a mob of human refugees. A Varkari medic lynched after someone suspected him of spying. I called an emergency tribunal, put out strict laws. No violence against civilians, no racial targeting, no executions without trial. Most followed, but not all. I heard whispers, saw groups forming, old Earth nationalist crews, war veterans with twitchy fingers, kids with too much trauma and not enough direction. And when I walked through the command halls now, some of the eyes didn't look at me with respect. They looked at me like I was in the way. Loma was the first to say it out loud. They don't need a leader anymore, she said one night while sharpening her knife. They need a direction. You gave them purpose, Kale. But if we don't shape it, they'll shape it themselves. She was right. Victory without vision turns into chaos. So we built a council, not a military one, a civilian council, representatives from every major race that had joined the uprising. Humans, Varkari, Plentari, a few fringe Kraven clans, even 2 defected Xyrelians. We called it the Ember Accord. The idea was simple: shared rule, shared voice. The rebellion wouldn't just be human. It would be built on something better, something the Council had always denied: equality. Not everyone agreed. Ride, the old colonel, stood at the center of the opposition. He'd been with us since Meridian, but something had changed in him. "This isn't what we fought for," he said at the first meeting. "Humans should lead. We bled for this. We died for it. Why the hell should a Xyrelian have a vote?" "Because if we do to them what they did to us," I replied, "then we've already lost." He spat on the floor. Spoken like someone who's never lost a daughter to a plasma raid. And then he walked out. He took 50 fighters with him. They didn't say where they were going, just packed their ships and left. Some say they joined an outlaw war band. Others think they're building a pure human fleet out on the rim. I don't know, but I know I'll see him again. And next time, it won't be a debate. Meanwhile, the council began fracturing. Some of their outer governors refused to follow orders. Others opened quiet talks with us, offering data, safe passage, even defection in exchange for protection. The council's public feeds went dark. Their capital burned. One city after another. But their core fleets remained. Old, massive, ruthless, and desperate. They pulled back toward the inner worlds, fortifying a last stand across 3 systems: Hyler, Brenthus, and the inner sanctum, Ilaris, their oldest world. It was there that they planned to end this war, and it was there we decided to finish it. The final campaign was codenamed Ashlight, not because we wanted fire, because we wanted clarity, not genocide, not mass extermination. We didn't want to become the monsters they'd always claimed we were. We wanted them accountable. We wanted them to face the species they'd crushed under boot for centuries, not as gods, as criminals. We called every fleet, every cell, every ally, even the ones we didn't trust. The Ember Accord officially declared war on the Council Corps. It wasn't just a human war anymore. It was a galactic reckoning. The night before departure, I stood alone on the observation deck. Karthus was silent. The ships were ready. The people were restless, and I felt tired. So damn tired. Loma joined me quietly. "You think we win tomorrow?" she asked. "No," I said. "I think we break something tomorrow, whether it's the Council or ourselves." She looked at me for a long time. "You still carry them, don't you?" "Who?" "Everyone you've lost." I nodded. "Always?" She reached out, hesitant, almost unnatural for her, and placed her hand on mine. "We'll carry them together," she said. We jumped into Hyler on the 3rd day of the new cycle. 53 ships, multi-species fleets, makeshift carriers, refitted war hulks. It wasn't elegant, but it was ours. The Council responded instantly. Over 80 vessels, including 3 Dreadnought-class warships, behemoths, the same kind that glassed Earth. Yai's virus hit first, crippling their outer comms. Then came Shade's infiltration team, taking out their targeting relays from within. Kaulo led the Varkari assault on the upper orbital ring, boarded a Xyrelian command ship, and held it until the engine exploded. Loma and I fought side by side in the ruins of a council listening post. She moved like death itself. Cold, clean, silent. At one point we stood back to back, 30 council soldiers charging us. She whispered, "Ready?" I said, "Always." We left none alive. But not all our allies stayed loyal. One Plentari wing broke formation, fled. Rumors came in of sabotage aboard 2 of our own carriers. Ride's faction, perhaps, or worse, new enemies born from old wounds. One Ember Accord representative was assassinated in the middle of the battle. A sign. Victory was close. But unity? That would take longer. After 7 hours of hell, the Council flagship fell. Not surrendered, destroyed. Their Supreme Chancellor, Elentar Voss, burned with it. His last transmission wasn't a speech, just static, cold and empty. When the wreckage drifted into the void, we knew the Council was dead, or at least dying. But we weren't cheering. Too many bodies floated outside. Too many names lost. Too many friends missing. Ye was one of them. Last seen rerouting core power to hold our shields during the final push. She knew it would kill her. She did it anyway. Back on Karthus, we lowered every banner. 1 day of silence. No speeches, no orders, just grief. And then, we rebuilt. In the weeks that followed, dozens of systems declared independence. Some asked for help forming new governments. Others asked for weapons, in case something worse came next. The Ember Accord met daily, struggling to define what came after victory. But one thing was clear. We weren't going back. The age of the Council was over. And humanity? We weren't ghosts anymore. We were the matchstick that lit the fire. People still ask me what we'll build next. I tell them the truth. I don't know. Because this was never about power. It was about remembrance, about taking back what was stolen. About making sure no species ever forgets what we became when our patience finally ended. We were born in fire. But this time, we won't burn alone. Peace isn't silence. It's not banners waving or fireworks lighting up the sky. It's not an anthem playing over the ruins of a fallen empire. Peace is messy, uneasy, and sometimes it's terrifying. Because once the war ends, there's nothing left to hide behind. No orders to follow, no monsters to blame. Just you, your choices, and the ghosts you brought with you. We won the war. But that didn't mean we knew how to live. 2 months after the fall of the Council, I found myself walking through the remains of what used to be Elaris Prime, the jewel of the Empire. The planet was quiet now. Empty. The golden towers were cracked, vines growing through shattered glass. The clean air they once sold to the highest bidder now smelled of smoke and fresh soil. The Ember Accord had declared it neutral ground. No flags, no armies, just memory. A reminder of what happens when power forgets its soul. I stood in the old Hall of Balance. Half the ceiling was gone. Wind swept through the marble floor where once the 12 high chancellors had sat in perfect symmetry, deciding which species got to live with dignity and which ones got to beg for scraps. I wasn't alone. Loma stood at my side, silent as always. She didn't say much those days, not because she didn't have anything to say, but because we were both too tired to pretend anymore. We'd survived, but survival came with a weight I hadn't expected. The war had ended. But the rage? That still lingered, and not just in us. Karthus had become a city now. Not a station, not a base, a true city, floating in the black, surrounded by growing fleets and broken ships being turned into homes. But the longer peace held, the more fractures appeared. Old wounds reopened, new factions rose. Some humans wanted retribution. War trials, executions, blood for blood. They carried lists of names and burned council records in the streets. Others, especially the younger generation, wanted to move on. What's done is done, they'd say. Let's build something better. And then there were the outsiders, the alien species that had joined our rebellion. They wanted seats at the table, protection, equality. The Accord was overwhelmed. Too many voices, too much history, and no blueprint for a future. That's when they turned back to me. I never wanted to be anyone's savior, but people remembered what I'd done. What we'd done together. The name Kale Maddox had become a symbol. Some even started calling me the fire starter. It wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. You light a fire that big, people expect you to keep feeding it or put it out. Either way, you never walk away clean. I didn't want power, but I also didn't want someone else with bloodlust taking it. So I accepted their call. And for the first time in over a century, humanity didn't just survive. We began to govern. The first thing I did was simple. I shut everything down. No military campaigns, no expansion, no strikes. For one full cycle, we paused everything. The Accord called it the Quiet Year, a time to bury the dead, rebuild what was broken, and talk, really talk, about what kind of world we wanted to leave behind. It wasn't easy. Grief has a sharp tongue. And peace can feel like betrayal when the blood hasn't dried. Some left, said we'd gone soft, that Maddox had lost his edge. Let them leave. We weren't going to win with fear anymore. We'd already done that. Now we needed to win with vision. We rewrote everything. No centralized rule, no species at the top. Every planet that joined the Accord got a voice, a vote, and a seat at the table. The new laws were blunt but honest. No species could own another. No military could strike without full council approval. History would be preserved without edits or erasure. And no one could hold leadership without first walking among the people they claimed to represent. That was my rule. I didn't want thrones. I wanted responsibility. So every leader had to spend one season living among refugees, working beside them, eating the same food, sleeping in the same broken shelters. You can't lead what you don't understand. Still, not everything healed. Some colonies refused to join us. Some species preferred isolation. And there were those who never stopped fighting. Ryde's warband resurfaced halfway through the Quiet Year. They struck a refugee convoy, killed 12 Varkari children, and left a message. This is what happens when you let aliens lead humans. We hunted them down. No trial, no speeches. Loma led the strike team. She came back without saying a word, sat beside me that night, and handed me Ryde's insignia, still soaked in ash. I didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. But the message was clear. We'd kill to protect peace, if we had to. As the months passed, I started walking more, through rebuilding zones, old cities, schools. I didn't wear armor anymore. No guns, just a coat and a name. People stared, whispered. Sometimes they cried. But mostly they asked the same thing. Is it really over? I'd always pause, then say, no, and smile. But it's finally begun. Then, one day, it happened. A child, half human, half plenary, ran up to me in a market square on Vexen 4. She held up a worn, hand-drawn flag. It was stitched from scraps of old council uniforms and Earth military cloth. The symbol on it wasn't a sword or a fist. It was a flame. Small, controlled, warm. Beneath it were words written in 3 languages. From patience came fire. From fire came light. I knelt down, took the flag, and felt something break inside me. Something that had been burning for too long. I cried. Not for war. For hope. Because that girl had never seen Earth. She'd never worn chains, never heard the lies, never lost a friend in orbit or bled in a trench. But she knew who she was. She was free. And that flag, our flag now, wasn't about rage. It was about remembrance. Years passed. The Accord held, not perfect, not peaceful every day, but alive. New settlements were founded. Former enemies became neighbors. New children learned the truth about the old war in open classrooms, not in whispers. And slowly, surely, Earth became more than a grave. It became a lesson. As for me, I stepped down. Not with a speech, not with applause, I just left. One day I handed over my insignia to the next chosen chair of the Accord, a young Kraven woman who used to be a council tech slave. Her name was Trell Vashta, and she was smarter than me in every way that mattered. Then I took a shuttle and flew into the stars. No guards, no escorts, no destination, just me, and the silence I'd earned. Sometimes I dream of Earth, not as it was in ruins, but as it might have been. Green hills, rainfall, a blue sky untouched by ash. In those dreams, I'm not Cale Maddox, war leader. I'm just a man, standing on soil, alive, and at peace. Epitaph, found in the Maddox archive, 48 years after the Quiet Year. He lit the fire, yes. But when the war was over, he taught us how to warm ourselves by it, instead of burning everything down. He didn't save humanity. He reminded us we were never broken to begin with.